Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. We got a special guest in the building as always. Welcome back to the man, to the guy who is now a lead pass producer for the Knicks games. He is for the Knicks. He is a New Yorker, diehard New Yorker. Brooklyn is in the building. My man, NBA content creator, Isaiah Bermudez. Welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, I love that. That was a beautiful intro. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be back
Welcome
on
to
the
the
show.
show, Isaiah.
I appreciate both of y'all, man. Y'all do great work. I love the podcast, and I hope y'all continue to do it. And I'm glad to
Yes.
be a part of it, man. This is a great time. This is a great time for me.
Yes. Now, football season is here, but basketball season is coming up in a few weeks, man. Now, you are in New York. You do work for NBA TV. So I want to ask you this question, man. With the whole mandated for, no, not so much for the NBA, but New York City and San Francisco are mandating people to get the vaccine as a requirement in the city. What are your thoughts about players who haven't got vaccinated yet, and they're going and people like, for example, Kyrie Irving, who hasn't took it yet? Do you think that this could be an issue for the Brooklyn Nets this season?
I think so. I think Kyrie Irving, of course, it's his body. He does what he wants with it, and we all should agree that when it comes down to it, like he's making a decision between if do I want to play 82 games of basketball and potentially win a championship, or do I want to make sure my body's clean and I'm making sure me and my family are safe. I think Kyrie's making a decision for himself, and that he's more focused on his body, his mind, and basketball. He as much as he loves it, that's not the priority at the moment when it comes down to his vaccination. The vaccination is a serious thing, and a lot of people need to do their due diligence or research and make that decision for themselves and their family. But that being said, I think the Brooklyn Nets, my opinion, they're not winning a championship without Kyrie Irving. I think Kyrie Irving is an essential piece to this team, despite having Harden and KD. Kyrie Irving had a career high last year points, and I believe field goal percentage. I believe he shot 50% from the field, and that's amazing for any guard. This guy is an extremely talented point guard, one of the more talented players we've ever seen in the league. And I think without him, the Nets would be in trouble for a full season or even a playoff series. I think the Nets are still a playoff team without Kyrie Irving, but they're not a championship team without Kyrie Irving.
Wow, you don't think they're a championship team without Kyrie Irving? Like, wait, championship contender?
Yeah, they're not a championship contender without Kyrie Irving. I think him missing, you saw a big lapse in how that offense operates. Kyrie Irving is the motor of that team. Essentially, you guys could score the bucket anywhere. Even when KD was out, you saw what James Harden and Kyrie Irving was doing on the court. There is a different kind of dynamic. It's different. It's different because Kyrie Irving is one of the more impossible players to guard because he has so many counter moves, and that counters what you try to do, what defense you throw at him. So he is able to finish in unrealistic angles. He's able to shoot over any kind of player, centers, power forwards, guards, like anybody throw at him, he's taking up one-on-one. He's able to score on them, and I think it changes when you look at James Harden and KD. Like as much as dominant as KD is, he prefers to make the right basketball play. Like he could go for 30 shot attempts a game. He prefers to make the right basketball play. James Harden at times when he's trying to take over the game, he winds up shooting himself out of the game, and he's shooting his team out of the game. He would go for like 26 shot attempts and only make 9 of them, and the other team would just have a bunch of scoring runs. So like when you look at a guy like Kyrie Irving, a guy who could really get a bucket at any time of the game, that's someone you need on the floor at all times. And if you're not having him for 40 plus games plus playoffs, it's going to be very difficult to play against teams like Milwaukee, play against teams like Miami in the Barclays Center, when they're going to be playing aggressive defense on James Harden, on KD, and you have to look for another source of points coming from somewhere. It's not going to come from LA. He can only give you but so much. Blake Griffin is not the same guy who was dominating physically all these players. So it's going to be very difficult for this team to really reach that championship NBA Finals without Kyrie.
So as you know, this vaccination policy with not only Irving, but Andrew Wiggins, it's not just this thing where they just miss a couple games. There is a potential where they can miss at least 40 home games. Now, as you know, Wiggins decided that he didn't want to take the vaccine, but he eventually did. But Kyrie Irving's still on the fence. And as of now, the team is working to try to get him to at least be there in practice. But that's the thing, you're missing practice, training camps, and those games. So considering that, how should the Brooklyn Nets handle this? Because they could lose him for potentially half the season. And right now, the Nets need somebody to be there for them to help them for the championship potential.
Unfortunately, the Nets are in a lose-lose situation, right? If Kyrie doesn't get the vaccination, he stays on the team, you're missing him for 40 plus games. And that's including any playoff home games. And if you trade him, you're losing your trust in all the players. You're losing trust in KD, who said he wants Kyrie to play on the team. James Harden, who came there because he said he believes in KD and Kyrie being able to take this team somewhere. And I believe Harden or Kyrie didn't sign none of their contract extensions yet. So right now, at this very moment, they are contracted to the end of the season and not further on. And I think that's a big worry for anybody on this roster. They're in a situation where it's beyond their control. It's everything. We have to kind of wait to see what Kyrie Irving does. Because if Kyrie Irving says, "Well, I'm not going to play 40 games. I'm okay with that," you have to make a business decision for yourself. You have to decide whether it's worth me staying here or not. I wanted to see if the Nets will pull the trigger and try to go after another player that's currently out there in the world, Ben Simmons, who Philly's looking to get essentially rid of because they've been trying to trade him all offseason. So do the Nets look at Ben Simmons and say, all right, we might need this guy because we need someone to play for 82 games. Not saying he's Kyrie Irving-esque or someone who could score like Kyrie Irving, but we need a guy who could sit there for 82 games. And Ben Simmons is a young tall guard, a guy who could play defense aggressively, and a guy who could complement KD and James Harden.
So you really think that the Nets should get Ben Simmons, and do you think that the Nets getting Ben Simmons is going to, shake things up at all for the Nets?
I mean, it gives the Nets a defender that they desperately need. He'll be arguably the best defender on that team, and he'll be highly used on that team. I guess a guy that said that he wasn't utilized well in Philly, which I'm super still confused about. But that's what Ben Simmons has said. He has not been utilized correctly in Philadelphia. He said that he can't play with the play style of Joel Embiid. I think that was the exact words. Like Joel Embiid's play style doesn't work with his style of play. So maybe if he goes to a team like the Brooklyn Nets, possibly he gets utilized more. He gets plays more defense. He is the guy essentially as from a playmaking standpoint. So it'll be him basically setting up James Harden and KD. If that's like something he's making like he wants in a sense, that's I guess what the Nets could use. And Kyrie to the Philadelphia 76ers. That to me, that's a championship team right there. Kyrie and Joel Embiid. That's something that's too high octane. That's gonna be a very difficult offense to guard, in my opinion. But it works. That's the only possible thing I can see happen if the Nets are looking for a guy to play 82 games.
But at the same time, unfortunately, it was reported that if Kyrie Irving gets traded, then he will retire. So either way, it's a losing situation. So Brooklyn, listen, either you cut him, you trade him, he's going to retire. I mean, you don't know what you could do in this situation. But here's what I do want to say. Do you believe, because the NBA players, 95% are vaccinated. And that means the 5% aren't. Do you believe that the NBA should require players to get vaccinated?
Oh, that's such a tough. To me, that's a tough question because I feel like things are gearing up. Like a lot of policies in America, and they're gearing up for mandatory vaccinations to do anything you want to do. Rather that's go out to eat, go out and enjoy yourself in a movie, club, even walk into a supermarket. It's under require mandatory vaccinations. I think it's only going to get to that point. I think it's slowly but surely getting to that point. I think in Toronto, there was something like if you're unvaccinated in Toronto, and you're not following protocol, you can spend 5 months in prison. And then that's getting to that extreme that if you're not vaccinated, you're not doing the proper procedures to make sure no one else is getting infected, you're getting 5 months in prison. So that's like another like crazy thing. So I think it's only going to lead to that point that if you're not vaccinated, then in order to play in the NBA, you're gonna have to be vaccinated. I don't see how it doesn't happen at this point because of how America is setting up their government policies and how the local governments are setting up their policies to ensure that everyone is vaccinated in order to partake in large group activities. And it just, it's I know like growing up is always like my body, like I could do what I want with it and stuff like that. It's getting to the point where it's not And it's not like that anymore. It's either you get the vaccination or you're going to have to hide yourself from the world for the rest of your life, because it's going to be very difficult for you to enjoy the fruits of the world if you can't even walk outside and take a breath of air.
That's interesting. You know what? And I know we talk about Brooklyn a lot, the Nets and everything. So let's talk about your Knicks. Your Knicks, look, we understand what happened in the playoffs. They surprisingly lost in 5 games thanks to Trae Young, Ice Trae. What do you think about the Knicks this upcoming season, who you now have Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier? What are your thoughts about that?
Those two guys could score the basketball. I think those guys are versatile players, and when you watch them play, there's no doubt about it. Kemba Walker's a guy who could really take a lot of guys off the dribble. Anybody really, tough defenders, bigs, small forwards, like anybody you throw at him, he's taking them one-on-one. I think that's a player that the Knicks missed. We replaced Alfred Payton and Reggie Bullock for Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. So we're replacing the defense for offense in a sense. And I think when you look at how Tibbs they coached the Knicks last year. A lot of guys who are offensive-minded players wind up being some of the better defenders in the league. When you look at a guy like Alec Burks, a guy in his entire career was not a defender at all. He always gave up the most points. He's a guy who was very lackluster on defense. But under Tibbs, he kind of put him like, I don't know, these guys want to play for Tibbs. And all Tibbs is asking for is effort. Every time we're on defense, I need 24 seconds of effort. And these guys are giving it to him on every possession. They force players off the three-point line. It's either going to take a tough three or you're going to go into the paint and face Mitch Robinson or Nerlens Noel. That was the game plan. I think the game plan is going to continue this season. I think when you look at the playoffs last year, they missed Mitchell Robinson's activity on defense. He's a guy that kind of disrupts a lot of offensive players' path to the paint. And I think when you look at that guy, and a guy who can also cause havoc on the perimeter, he's a guy who doesn't give up on any plays. He's a guy who's very energetic. And I think if he continues to rehab and he stays healthy and plays this season, I feel like if you would play against the Atlanta Hawks, you would have saw a different outcome, in my opinion. I think a lot of the floaters that were happening was sailing right over Nerlens Noel. I think Capella was another one that was being a factor because Mitch Robinson wasn't on the court. I think when Mitch Robinson, his length as a player disrupts everything that teams try to do and throw at them. But this Knicks team, they look a lot better than last season based off just being able to score. We got 2 young pups in Grimes and McBride who are gonna want to get their opportunities on the court, but they have to earn it through practice. And that's one thing Tibbs always prides himself on is hard practices, and that's how it reflects on the court. If you're not playing hard in practice, you're not going to get any time on the court. And you see that by a lot of players like Kevin Knox, who everyone thought would have a good year under Tibbs. Guy didn't get no minutes. Same thing with Frank Ntilikina, a guy who everyone thought Tibbs loved. If you're not practicing hard, you're not getting on the court. Alfred Payton took all his minutes, and Alfred Payton, I'm not going to sit here and call him a way better player than Frank Ntilikina, but Frank Ntilikina, when you're not practicing hard, you got to sit down, brother.
So last season for the Knicks was interesting because we did see this talent starting to grow, with Julius Randle being that most improved player candidate with that great season. You had RJ Barrett, Kevin Knox, all these other young guys. I'm just curious to know, do any Knicks players specifically have some amount of pressure this season to meet their expectations?
I think the player that I feel like has the most pressure on this roster is RJ Barrett. And I say RJ Barrett because he's gonna have to do a lot more on the starting lineup this season opposed to the previous seasons. He's arguably gonna be tasked to guard the best player on the opposing side of the team on the court. So every night he's guarding rather the best guard, the best forward, and that's gonna be a very big responsibility. And that's also give him growth in his talent and how he is perceived in the league. He's been disrespected since he came in the league. Wasn't in the all-time rookies list. He's not even in the top 100 NBA players list. They got other players above him, rookies above him that haven't improved anything yet. And RJ Barrett has only improved from his rookie season. He shot 40% from the three last year, 44 from the field. And that was a vast improvement from his previous year, his first year when he shot 32% from the three. This year, RJ Barrett does have a lot of weight on his shoulders. He's going to be asked to be an actual two-way player. You're going to be tasked to guard the best players on the opponent's team, and you're going to be asked to make these threes and hit the shots that you were making last year, and also finishing at the rim. That's one thing that a lot of people always criticize him for, is not being able to finish at the rim as often as he should. So that's a lot of things that he's going to have to do better this season, and it's going to be needed if the Knicks want to get back to that top 6 seed.
So what's your expectations for the Knicks, man? Where you see them going?
I say it's winning 50 games this year. I think
50 games.
Wow,
yes.
50
games. 100%.
Okay.
50 out of 82.
5-0.
I think when you look at the roster they constructed this year, it's going to be very high octane offense. And when you look at the defense side, I know a lot of people have criticisms about defense, but defense is all effort. So if they're willing to play for Tibbs and they're willing to show that they could sit there and stay in front of the guys, push them off the 3-point line for a full 24 seconds each defensive possession, this Knicks team is going to be very difficult to beat. Like I said, Payton and Bullock, as good as defenders as they were, nobody walked into this locker room and said Payton and Bullock would be top defenders on a team that was number 1 in defense. No one ever said that about them in their career. So the fact that they went in there and played for Tibbs the way they did and defended the way they did, I think you could input any player and they'll give the same amount of effort and show that they could defend guys and stay in front of them. I'm not talking about lock them up. I'm not talking about stop them from scoring every point, but you have to play hard every second you are on defense. And I think the Knicks can do that. So I think I got them winning 50 games. I think the East is a lot better as well. So them winning 50 games may also be, they may be 6th seed. They might be 5th seed. We might see Chicago up there. Miami wasn't in the top 6 seed. They're arguably going to be up there. Is Philly going to be in the top 6 seed without Ben Simmons? Is Ben Simmons playing? Is he not playing? So there's a lot of question marks on this team. Boston, they got Dennis Schroeder, but they also got Al Horford back. They got players that we think could complement them, but they also got a new coach. So there's going to be some growing pains. So that is going to reflect in their record that they're not going to be a top 6 seed. Are they going to be a top 6 seed? There's a lot of different teams in the East that have opportunities to jump up to the top 6 seed. I think when you look at the Brooklyn Nets, you say, yeah, that's a top 6 seed. Milwaukee Bucks, that's a top 6 seed, right? And you Atlanta Hawks, they only gotten better. Hopefully, if their guys are all healthy, they'll be a top 6 seed. But if DeAndre Hunter's continue to have injuries, that's gonna be tough. And if Trae Young has nagging injuries, if Clint Capella has nagging injuries, it'll be difficult for them to repeat and get into that top 6 seed because of how good the Eastern Conference has gotten.
So you just mentioned a lot of free agents, and as you know, free agency just passed, and a lot of these teams are looking different now. I mean, Chicago, you got DeRozan there, and you got Lonzo, and you got Alex Caruso. You mentioned Dennis Schroeder with Boston. We have a lot of other teams that look different. What do you think? Who do you think were the winners of that free agency?
I think Chicago Bulls did a great job of acquiring a bunch of defensive players. I think when you look at DeRozan, Caruso, Lonzo, those are guys that could guard perimeter and very efficient. And I think they caused a lot of havoc in perimeter. The only issue is the shooting. DeRozan's not a shooter. Caruso is not a 3-point shooter. Lonzo, he got better shooting threes, but before then, he wasn't doing as well at the 3-point line. But I like Lonzo Ball as a player, and I think he's only growing as the spotlight got off of him a little bit. Once the spotlight got off of him, he started to grow exponentially because of the negative connotation of, you're LeVar Ball's son, the big mouth, XYZ. First of all, shout out to LeVar Ball because he's definitely a great father. Almost had 3 sons in the league. I still feel like LiAngelo
almost. LiAngelo didn't make the team, so
hey. he need to. That brother nice, but that's neither here or there. But I think the Chicago Bulls, the biggest question is, what is Billy Donovan going to run? Because when we know Billy Donovan and his coaching style, it's a lot of run and gun. It was a lot of KD and Westbrook taking over the show, and then Westbrook taking over, shooting 29 shots a game to get him to a playoff spot. So I got to see what Billy Donovan writes up to help Lonzo Ball clear up the space and become that traditional point guard that he stated in the press conference for the Chicago Bulls team. I know the ball is better in the Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan's hands, and that's how they scored majority of their buckets. So now LaVine is playing more off ball, DeRozan playing more off ball. How is that going to work when DeRozan's not really a shooter in that sense? Like, he probably could shoot 30% from the 3. That's not good enough for this team. And I think getting rid of Lauri Markkanen is going to hurt him a little bit. I think he was like one of those stretch 5 players that could work out. He was a good shooter. Defense was not his strong suit, and I understand that. And I understand Vucevic is a better offensive player. But I think if you would have Vucevic and Markkanen at the 4 and 5, that would have been a nice shooting touch. But the inside of the paint is very sweet, and I think it's going to be a field day for any teams with bigs or like power forwards that go in the paint a lot. They could have scored Vucevic a lot and probably possibly get him in foul trouble and get him out the game. So the Bulls have a lot of questions to answer, but I know their perimeter defense is young. They have a lot of they have a ton off the bench. I do like Satoransky and this dude Kobe White. I believe Satoransky's still on that bench, so I mean I think so. But they have depth on that bench that I like as a guard from guard play. But they both still have some questions to answer.
Who would you say are your sleepers in the East and the West this upcoming season?
Sleepers in the East. I think a team that a lot of people are sleeping on are the Pacers. And I think for reasons being that the Pacers are getting TJ Warren back this season. They got Caris LeVert. Hopefully, if he stays healthy, he's gonna be back. If the Pacers do it or not, I don't know if it's gonna happen. But if they somehow get Ben Simmons without giving up Caris LeVert, that's gonna be very interesting to watch. But other than that, they got Malcolm Brogdon and Domantas Sabonis. So they have talent on that Pacers team. And I think the biggest issue was what is Rick Carlisle going to do? On that as a coach. So I think that's the biggest question. Like, how is he going to run that offense and how is that team going to work? I think Rick Carlisle, when you look at his overall career, he does have some questionable losses in his career, but this is a guy who does win basketball games, a guy who does win a lot of regular season basketball games. But I think this is going to be a test to see how he could really impact this Pacers team and how much they really played for him. Because I know Rick Carlisle is an old school coach, so there's a lot of growing pains in there. But I think the Pacers could be a sleeper team. Also, I think the Wizards could be an interesting team to watch at too. They have a lot of role players to complement Bradley Beal, so it's interesting to see how they'll all mesh around. I know how Kuzma had a rough go about yesterday at a ticket conference. People were saying he's too arrogant and stuff like that. And I feel bad for him.
Oh, but my gosh.
You're in a different city, so now you got to show off for your city. This is just where it's at. In the Western Conference, I said it off air. I think the Houston Rockets have an opportunity to shock the world. I think they were the laughing stock the last few seasons. I think when you look at Jalen Green and KPJ, those two are talented guards. And I think when you look at the rest of the roster, Christian Wood, great player, Detroit's very own. He's a really good player. He's a guy who's shooting the ball at a high mark. And I think he's going to have an opportunity to really rise on his roster and potentially be the star that the Rockets need at the moment. You look at Josh Christopher, a rookie, and a guy who is very sporadic. He give you a lot of points. Sometimes he makes some messed up plays, but he's a rookie. And I think he's going to show that his athletic abilities on the court. And the coach, Silas, I think he's a guy who is very underrated. I think he's a guy who has a brilliant mind. He just was given a raw deal last year. James Harden wanted out. John Wall's out of in and out of the roster. KPJ in and out of the roster. You had potentially almost 8-7 players a night playing in the game. So I think this year he's actually getting a full team, and they could possibly, like I said, I don't think they're gonna be like a playoff contending team, but they could contend for that 10th seed. Like that's the way the Western Conference teams are coached. They're not coached well. The Minnesota Timberwolves have talent for years. They couldn't get anywhere. The Pelicans had talent for years. Can't get anywhere. They had talent. They just, for whatever reason, cannot get to that playing spot. It just does not make any sense to me. And I think there's a team that OKC, they're not gonna make no 10 seed. I just don't. I probably personally I'm sorry.
OKC, even with SGA, it's not.
He was like, no, like OKC, no, like take them out.
OKC,
I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about
OKC. I ain't worried about that.
They collected them draft picks for a reason. They staying there for a long time.
Oh my
gosh.
I think,
it's like whatever. But right now, I think the Rockets is a team that could really surprise people, and I think it'll be a bigger disappointment for a team like the Timberwolves and the Pelicans that if they underachieve again this season, you got to start looking at making general manager changes, because this team, they're not setting up the team for success. You got guys like Zion Williamson already looking to get out of there. His camp is already looking to get out of there, and that's not a good look. David Griffin at one point, people were saying he was a great executive. Now they're saying people are making fun of him. His own organization is not really liking his they don't really like him. They don't like him in that seat. So it's just a nasty situation over there in the Western Conference.
Now I want to ask you this, Zay. So as we know, this year's rookie class is talented. Evan Mobley, Cleveland, Jalen Green, Houston. We know the #1 draft pick going to Detroit. I'm just curious to know, what rookies are you going to be looking out for this season, and who do you think could potentially be the rookie of the year?
That's a great question. Well, I think the two rookies, I think that were potentially 1 and 2 was going to be Suggs and Green. I think those are the two guys I'm really looking for at the most. Jalen Suggs has the opportunity to really explode in Orlando, just because Orlando doesn't have anything going on over there. So I think when a team doesn't really have anything going on over there, and you could really just put an impact, like I'm gonna play my game, and I'm gonna let this kind of I'm gonna let this team kind of see what I'm really made of and what the league could show the league what I can really do, And they got Jamal Mosley over there, a guy who was coaching Luka Doncic. So I think when you got to compare Suggs with Mosley, I think he will learn a lot from Mosley. I think Mosley will give him more opportunities to score the basketball. And then when you look at that roster, there's a lot of young guys that are looking to prove themselves, especially Cole Anthony, And Cole Anthony had the interpretation that he was going to our team to be the guy. He got drafted over there. He was going to be the guy eventually. Drafting Jalen Suggs kind of puts a stop to that. So you're going to have to possibly take a backseat, or you play up to his standard and play as good as Suggs or play better than Suggs to show that you are the talented guy on that team. But I think Jalen Suggs has the opportunity to really be that guy. I think another one is Barnes, Scotty Barnes. I think he's another one on Toronto Raptors. He has the opportunity to really show that he's a lockdown defender, and he's a guy who's so versatile that I think he's still like a raw player in my opinion. He's still like a raw prospect. Like his offensive game is not like molded yet. He still could do a lot more on offense, and he could still mold into a good shooter, a good player. So on offense, he's still very raw. But on defense, he's very aggressive. He's like a pest, He's gonna get under your skin on defense. He's gonna make sure that he's there in your face all possessions. And I think he's the guy who could potentially be one of those Scottie Pippen kind of players where he's locking you up 94 feet. There's nothing you could do about it. So that's another guy I'm looking at too.
You know what? This man said Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs, but he didn't mention Kate Cunningham. How dare you? Listen. You talking
like
to two people from you talking to people who from Detroit right here. How dare you say no Cook? No, you didn't even say Kate Cunningham. You didn't even say he was in the conversation. What's going on here?
No, I think Kate Cunningham's a clear. If he plays at least 70 games, right? I think he's a clear rookie of the year. I don't see nothing about that. She said, "What plays am I going to watch?" I ain't watching Kate Cunningham because I already know what he could do. 6'8", the brother 6'8", could shoot, could dunk, could pass. Wait, like, what am I'm gonna watch him to do what? To win?
What he did in college is different in NBA right now. Okay, I understand. It's different in NBA.
I think it's gonna be a similar production because of how tall he is. 6'8" guards are not the norm yet in the league. He's gonna be guard. People are gonna be guarding him. Gonna be like 6'4", 6'3". Unless they put forwards on him, and then until that, he's gonna be blowing right past him. I think Kate Cunningham is a very special talent. He's a guy who is what Ben Simmons should be, a guy who could shoot the ball, tall point guard, who could do everything, could literally do everything on the floor, and he's working hard at doing everything on the floor. So Kate Cunningham is really a bright spot for the Detroit Pistons, but I've been telling him low for the longest time. I like Luka Garza, and he's a guy who could potentially be a guy on the Pistons rotation. He don't have to be a starter off the rip. Okay. I just don't see Isaiah Stewart being that guy. Isaiah Stewart, 6'8". He's a gritty player. He's not too talented on offense. He's not a guy who could post up, could score, has playmaking abilities. I think Luka Garza is another version of. I think his career path is like close to Jokic. If he really works hard at his craft and he really does everything he needs to do, he could be a Jokic kind of player. Like Luka Garza, he came into the league a little overweight. He's been working tremendously hard on losing weight. He's working on defense. He talks about it. He's working on his vertical. He's working on everything on defense that he really needs to do because his offensive game is poised. He's doing step backs in preseason. He's doing post drop shots and everything. Like he's a guy who could score the basketball. I think Luka Garza is a guy that Detroit needs to hold on to because I know they have a lot of centers. They have a lot of bigs on that roster, but I think Luka Garza is a guy they really need to continue to develop, continue to work, allow him to work and get better, and he could potentially be that starter on that team.
I mean, this future is bright. He was one of the best players in the Big Ten for Iowa, so I'm very interested to see how the Pistons are going to utilize him, and of course with Cunningham, and we got to mention Killian Hayes. This is his second season now. And he's working on the development stage. But one thing, just shout out to Troy Weaver. He's doing a tremendous job as a GM. And another thing, too, Big Ben Wallace, he's going to be working now with Troy Weaver and Dwayne Casey. So the future is bright in Detroit, and we're wishing the same thing for the Knicks as well. Because the Knicks, they got the people, and they just need a little bit of work. behind the scenes, but they're going to be just fine in the future.
Yeah, and one more thing we gotta go back to some Brooklyn, New York style right here. So listen, your man Mark Jackson, he has something interesting to say. He said if he had a vote, he will vote for Luka Doncic to be one of the 75 greatest players ever. Now you see that book right there, that book that says NBA 75. All right, this season will be the 75th anniversary. Do you believe that when it's all said and done, Luka Doncic is one of the 75 greatest players ever?
I mean, that's difficult to even, like right now, when we're talking about recency bias, of course, people are going to say, yeah. I think that's the issue because Luka Doncic, what he did in his first 2 seasons is ridiculous. What Trae Young did in his first 2 seasons was ridiculous. People don't even talk about that either. So it's like, it's
not more than Luka.
Yeah, like, hey, I mean, he went farther in the playoffs. He took the team to the Eastern
Conference. Went to the conference finals.
And he defied a lot of odds. But both players, and like I think it's interesting how he mentioned, Luka Doncic being a top 75 greatest of all time, and that's interesting coming from Mark Jackson. And I think when it's all said and done, there's a potential if he continues to play at this level for the next 10, 20 years. You can't argue against that. That's elite stats right there. That's something that hasn't been done. So I think Mark Jackson may be onto something. I think he jumped the gun a little too early. But it's a potential.
It's not the first time. Not the first time.
Yeah, that's very true. Mark Jackson is a guy. He's a man of many words. So, but I think when you look at Luka Doncic, he's very special to the game of basketball. And I think everyone around him, everyone that is watching his greatness, you could say this guy is something special. We're watching something that we haven't seen since LeBron came in the league. Like that's the point you get to. Like this guy is something different.
I mean, it's just crazy to just think of 75 years of just greatness in the NBA. And just recently, they just dropped their YouTube video just promoting the 75th season. There was a lot of good moments, a lot of teams being honored. What do you think about that video? And what do you just think about the NBA approaching their 75th anniversary and just thinking of all the progression, the evolution, everything they had to do from when they first started all the way up to now?
I mean, I think it was first the video was it was a fun video, so the NBA showing like they're bringing fun back. That's one. Two, it was paying homage. That they paid homage to a lot of players, a lot of different generations of players, a lot of different eras, and they showing love to everybody. I think that's a big thing. And I think when you come into a time where everything is super competitive and we're trying to, they're trying to push out the best product and be the best product that they can be for all sports. To have a fun video and just kind of sit down and show homage to everybody who really contributed to make the league to what it becomes today is just a beautiful thing to see. I think it was a great video in a sense where it's it's kind of bring everyone together to really enjoy this 75th season. I think I said it before. The season started, the preseason started. Like this year was like it felt something was special. Something was in the air. Like it was gonna be one of those seasons where if everyone's healthy and the league could really like push out like the best product, this might be one of the best seasons ever in the NBA. It's kind of gearing up for that kind of momentum going to the season.
All right, before we go, what is your hold on? Let me take it back. Let me clear this real quick. I gotta make sure I set the stage for you. What is your NBA Finals preview, and who do you have winning the title?
Okay,
I'm putting you on the spot. We got less than 2 weeks. We got less than 2 weeks. Come on, man.
All right, so I'm gonna give you a hot take. I think I'm gonna give you a hot take, and I think it's gonna be a good one too. If Klay comes back 90%, I got the Golden State Warriors versus Miami Heat in the finals.
Wow.
What? Oh no. Oh my God.
Okay, wait.
God.
First off, let's break it down.
No.
So for the East, you have the Heat going against the Nets and the Bucks and the 76ers. And you have so do you think Kyle Lowry is going to be a factor in that? Because they did pick him up.
Of course, but I think Kyle Lowry's going to be a factor. He's a two-way player, but I also think they picked up a lot of wing players that's going to be very gritty defensively. As you have multiple guys that's able to guard Kevin Durant. I think that's why Miami Heat built this team, is that you have multiple guys to guard Kevin Durant in any series. That's the only guy they're worried about. They're not worried about the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis. I think the only guy they're really worried about.
about that? Because
I think so.
the Bucks still got that man Giannis, and I mean, you seen that?
They got the Greek freak.
The Greek freak, Chris Middleton. You sure about
Drew
that?
Holiday.
You don't think that the Bucks are going to be the problem for the net?
I think the Bucks they did a wrong thing in the offseason. That was let go of PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker was arguably the most valuable asset on that team defensively, and I think that's gonna hurt them on playoffs. I think that they didn't replace him. They couldn't find a guy that can mimic what PJ Tucker offers to that defense. That's gonna be a problem. And I think adding PJ Tucker to that Miami Heat defense is only gonna amplify what they do. And they already play defense. So you put PJ Tucker in a defensive team, and he goes in that team and plays gritty as he does. It's gonna be terror on defense.
And this man said Miami versus Miami
well,
versus
Golden State. Let's go to the Warriors now. So I'm curious to know why you picked the Warriors too, because we know Klay Thompson. I believe that he'll come back and be okay, but I mean he suffered at least 2 ACL injuries. So you have that, and this Warrior team is not even the same as they were even without Kevin Durant. And when you think about Wiseman, you think about all these guys like Wiggins and Poole. Do you think the Warriors can actually make it that far?
I think the Warriors can make it to the NBA Finals, and I think it's because of they have their core still intact. You know, Klay Thompson's been in these young guys' ear, even with the injury. He's always been on the bench. He has a camaraderie with the team already. I think when he comes back, if he's at least 90%, and we're talking about a guy who shoots the ball lights out, if he could come back and 90% still shooting the ball lights out the way he has done, it's gonna be very difficult for teams to really guard anybody on this Warriors team, especially Curry, who's going to be running around the floor. We just saw a season where Curry was getting triple teamed at half court. That's not happening when you got Klay Thompson on the floor. That's not happening when you got other guys that's going to step up and really shoot the ball. You have to remember Toscano, Jordan Poole, Moses Moody and Kuminga that come off the bench as well. And those guys are now slouches. Those guys are long defenders who can shoot the basketball, who are very aggressive on the court when they're on the court. I think even though they're rookies, that's asking a lot of them. They're very talented players. And I think we're in a league where these talented players, if they don't have a lot of pressure on them and they're just coming in to fill a role, they play really well. We're not asking them to be all around players. We're not asking them to shoot the three like Curry or Klay. We're asking you just to play your game and just play defense. That's all you have to do. Come on the court and play defense. Moses Moody is 6'7" with a 7'1" wingspan. He's going to be opposing to a lot of guys on the opponent's teams. And I think Kuminga is a guy who's very aggressive. He don't care who's in front of him. He's going to score the basketball. And I think the Warriors have an opportunity to really shock the league. And I know that the Lakers made a star-studded team that is going to be surrounded with, a bunch of guys like Melo, Westbrook, post Braun, AD in them. And I think the issue is that there a lot of these players are injury prone, and I think when it comes down to it, Trevor Ariza is already out 8 weeks.
So that is true. Yeah, he's out. Yeah, he's out for 8 weeks.
Wow.
This is only the beginning. This is only the beginning.
So it's like when you look at the Warriors team, like I understand you said it wasn't the same as when KD was there, which is true, it's not. But they have a lot more role players on this team than when KD was there. When you look at all these guys, they have more weapons that they utilize on this Warriors team than when KD, Curry, and Klay was there. Because when Curry and Klay was there and KD, they only had a set of guys. There was like an 8-guy rotation. Now this Warriors team has damn near 10 guys you could put in and still be effective as on the court. So I like this Warriors team a lot. I think they're going to shock a lot of people by making NBA Finals, and it's going to be Golden State versus Miami in the NBA Finals.
So who do you have win wait. So who's going to win the championship?
I think when it's all said and done, I think Miami wins their championship because of how much defense that they added to this roster.
Wow.
I think Miami Heat is one of the more slept on teams in the league.
You are really spicing it up, brother.
Miami 2022.
I think Miami is very slept on. If you look at last season, right? They only had a month off. They had a month off season. Jimmy Butler got COVID. Bam Adebayo was in and out the rotation. This team was hurt. It was hobbled from beginning to end. The only guys you really had was Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, and even then, Tyler Hero had a very all season. His body. I know these guys are tired. They're coming into a well-rested season. They got more players. They have more assets. They have more guys who play defense. Victor Oladipo might come back this year, and that's another big thing on this team because he's a guy who can score basketball.
He's coming back in November.
So it's another thing on this Miami Heat team. And it's like if their guys are healthy and ready to play and they could play the season, it's going to be difficult for anyone to guard them. I mean, if one, it's going to be difficult for anyone to guard them. But then two, it's going to be difficult to score on these guys. They might be when it's all said and done, when you look at the numbers, they might be number one in defense in all categories because of how stout these guys are. You have 8 defenders that are in rotation. That is scary. Because how you're starting 5 are all defensive players, and then the 3 guys, 4 guys come off the bench are all defensive players too. What are you really gonna do? How do you combat that in a sense?
Now, do you think that it's just the fact that it was health, or it could be more? Because even without health, like as far as I'm concerned, Bam played a full season, and Bam didn't really live up to the potential that we know that he could be. Even if Jimmy Butler, we could make the case that maybe he was tired. We know Jimmy Butler to be a dog. So for him to perform the way he performed, which was, to say the least, underwhelming, I mean, can we put that to account as well for the Heat?
That Heat team was not only physically tired, they were mentally drained. They just came out of a bubble where they played into the finals. They didn't win. So now, not only you're in a bubble for that long and you lose, now you come out the bubble and you have a month left to get prepared to the next season. These guys usually take a month or 2 off just to have a vacation away from basketball. So the fact that you only have a month to get prepared into the next season wasn't sitting well with any of these guys. These guys came into the season already drained. They were on the court. When you watch Miami Heat play last season, they were losing. They lost to the Hawks in the season series. And this is a team, Miami Heat team, that was killing teams left and right in the regular season 2 years prior. So it's like you have to watch to see how they kind of played throughout the entire season. They didn't play good basketball last year. That was not Miami Heat basketball. That was a very low standard. If you even ask Eric Spoelstra, he would tell you like that was a low standard basketball kind of play from Miami Heat. They were not playing the highest of their capabilities. So I think when you look at this team this year, it's gonna be a lot of different factors. You got Kyle Lowry, champion, PJ Tucker, champion. Now you're bringing championship pedigree to a roster that was already hungry, wanting to win a ring. Now you bring in Victor Oladipo comes back on the roster. Now you got Victor Oladipo and Jimmy Butler, 2 other dogs that want to score the basketball and play defense at the highest possible level. Bam Adebayo, if he improves his offensive game this season, or he does anything remotely close to what he did when they went to the finals, this team is going to be very scary. It's going to be very difficult to guard these guys. And I like the little under the guys that don't people talk about, like Gabe Vincent. I like Gabe Vincent, the guy who could shoot the basketball. Mm-hmm. This guy could really shoot lights out. Tyler Hero, if he plays anything like himself, that's gonna be scary.
That's a big if right there. Tyler Hero.
That's a big if. I mean, sophomore year was bad. I said it. Like Miami had a bad sophomore year, but I think this year is gonna change. And Duncan Robinson getting paid that contract, he deserves it. He's gonna shoot lights out again. Kyle Lowry has a lot of weapons on this team. You could say he has more weapons than that year that he won in Toronto Raptors. He has a lot of weapons on the Miami Heat team. And you're going to see it as the season goes on. This Miami Heat team, don't be surprised that Miami Heat will be one of the top 3 seeds this year.
Listen, okay. One thing I will agree with you is that when you say that, usually players take like a month or 2 off, I would say that usually, when you play a sport, for your whole entire career, you usually want to play a different sport. So then the other parts of your body, you can rest. So then when you play another sport, it actually helps you play with other parts of your body that you don't normally use. Mm-hmm. So like if I play basketball, then I could play baseball for a few months, or I could go golfing. That's what athletes usually do. They play a different sport so they can rest their body. Well, parts of their body, but you know what I'm saying? It's good for the soul, you know what I'm saying? The mind, the soul, you know what I'm saying? But look, man, you really spicing up. Shoot, I'm curious who you think is going to be MVP then.
Oh, MVP? You gotta go with Luka. How Luka, man? He deserved it last year. Like this guy deserves
he deserved it last year.
Last year,
he deserved it last year. That man was putting up numbers.
How many games you expect this guy to get?
Man, I listen. Let me tell you this, right? The international players are taking over the NBA, and I'm telling you that the international players are taking over the NBA. We just seen the last couple of years, Giannis and Jokic win an MVP. It's only good. Luka looking like the next player to get an MVP. This guy is primed for one at this point. They're not like, we talk about Team USA. It's getting to the point where like, I don't know, man. Well, once LeBron and KD leave, Team USA not looking too good no more. It's looking like it's looking.
We won this past summer. So hey.
Well, besides KD, the international factor, do you really feel that Luka Doncic has the intangibles to be the MVP? Because there's a very distinct difference.
I think so. I think when you look at the Dallas Mavericks team, he's clearly the most valuable player there. And I think if you put Luka Doncic in the league of like where he ranks as an asset to any team, right? I think if you put Luka Doncic on any team, he'll be the most valuable player on majority because of what he brings to the game. He's a guy who could pass the ball, a guy who has good playmaking, a guy who could shoot over anybody, a guy who could score 30, a guy who literally does it all on the court except for play defense at a high level. But this guy is a extremely volatile weapon on offense that is unguardable. A guy who's 6'7", a guy who doesn't have fast moves, but he still gets to his spots and score at will. I think that makes the intangibles of an MVP, in my opinion. I mean, that's why they voted in Jokic. He uses his ability to really change the game on the floor. I think Luka is literally one of the definitions of changing the game on the floor, because when he's on the court, it's you see the skill gap between him and other players.
We definitely like the fact that you were on this show. We appreciate you for being part of the show for the 4th straight time. We're going to have you back on the show during the season and see how things going. I know that, life as a New Yorker, I know it's been something, especially for your Yankees and your Jets, your Giants. I mean, Rangers, where do I begin, brother? I mean, where do I begin? And the Mets too. But, it is what it is. Right. But it is what it is. Listen, how do people reach you? How do people contact you?
And man, you go follow me on Instagram, Good Vibes by Zay. That's always the best place to reach me. You can talk about sports, talk about music, anything you would like to speak about, or just spots to go to in New York. You can reachable, and you can just reach out to me or talk about anything.
All right, where you from again? Where you from again? Represent. Where you from?
I'm from Brooklyn. Do or die.
All right, that's it. My man's lead pass producer for the Knicks, hometown Knicks, Isaiah Bermudez. It's the Bounce Podcast. We out.